Gurur Brahma, Gurur Vishnu, Gurur Devo Maheshwara, Gurureva Param Dhamma, Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Chinmayam Vyapyat Sarvam, Trailokyam Sacharacharam, Tatpadam Darshitam Yena, Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Tvameva Mata cha Pita, Tvameva Bandhuscha Sakha, Tvameva Vedya Dravidam, Tvameva Sarvam Mama Deva Deva, Tvameva Sarvam Mama Deva Deva. Jai Guru. Om Sahana Vavatu, Sahana Bhunaktu, Sahaviryam Karavavahai, Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. So where are we in our text, Aditi?
On verse 31.
Verse 31. Will you help us out, please?
Of course. Aham shabdena vikhyatah eka eva sthita paraha sthulatva nekatam praptah katham syad pratham sadhye hakka puman. The Supreme Purusha, which is known as I, is one transcendental truth. On the other hand, the gross bodies are many. How can this body be the self?
So here, Shankara is following the idea that we've covered last week of dealing logically why the body cannot be the self. Why does he drill down on this? He's going to do quite a few verses on the same topic. It's because identification with the body is the root identification of the ego. We want to think, oh, I'm so subtle, you know, I'm dealing with these subtle thoughts of the ego versus the self and all that kind of stuff. No, the root of it is I think I'm my body. So that's the attachment, that's the identification that is most difficult to disentangle. Now, the word he uses here is Purusha. This is a word that's incredibly old. It occurs in the Rig Veda. We have the beautiful hymn, the Purusha Sutram. It's one of the words taken up by Sankhya philosophy. Sankhya philosophy is a very old form. In Sankhya philosophy, the sense of individuality is called Purusha, And the problem is he gets entangled with Prakriti matter. Gita comes along and uses the language of Sankhya, but redefines it. So in Gita, Purusha is seen as really nothing but the Supreme Self. The idea of an individual Purusha, an individual Jiva, is not a real entity that somehow must undergo some change. Doesn't change into Brahman. Your individuality doesn't become some great powerful being. I mean, you can make the individuality very powerful and large, but still not infinite. So Vedanta thunders the doctrine of what we call ajati. I is never born. I is never born. Our problem is not trying to fix my personhood. The issue is to rediscover who I am. And I see this phony self. I'm fond of the term chit-chaya, which Shankara uses. The shadow self, the counterfeit self. When we have this introversion of our attention and we go looking for me, this ego falls, it disappears. It's like shining a light on a shadow, it just is gone. We find something real, the ground of being. Uttama Purusha, the ultimate essence of what it is to be a person. Gita Purushottama, Uttama Purusha. So he says, the ground of being is one. One truth, ek sat, one existence. How can the body be the self? Because there's a whole lot of them. Again, this becomes easy to understand if we go to the dream state. You are the God of your dream. In the dream state, you have a dream body. And you have an ego identified with it. And I keep out, I have a locus perception in the dream body. And then I see other people in my dream. But from the viewpoint of the waker, it's very clear. No, there weren't really bunches of people. Even though I had the locus of perception in the dream body, as opposed to my mother or the dog or somebody else. All of them are created by imagination. This is no different. This is no different. Just as nothing that happens in the dream world ever touches the waker, nothing that ever happens in the waking state ever touches the Purusha, the self. It's completely independent, asangaha, completely unattached. Any thoughts on this? All right, next verse.
Aham drishtatya ya siddho deho drishayata ya stitaha mamayamiti nirdesha atakatham sya dehakaha puman. By expressions such as "this is mine" and so on, it is clearly established that I, the self, is a witness, and the body is an object of perception. How can the body be the self?
And he uses the word gata there, didn't he? Thought I heard you chant that.
Maybe. I might have mispronounced something.
Doesn't matter. So the body is a possession. It's my nose, my toes, my elbow, my ears. When I'm sick, my nose is running. My head hurts and is thick. When I've been doing exercise, my muscles are sore. It is a possession, and I am aware of it. Most importantly, it is an object of cognition. And none of us are children, so we have enough life experience with the body to see its change. If you have a photo of yourself as a kid, or maybe as a teenager, and you go look in the mirror and you go, my God, where did that old body come from? What happened to the body of the youngster? Gone, dead. But you are still you. The body is not a constant, but you are. Next verse.
Aham vikarahinastu deho nityam vikaravan iti pratiyate sakshat katham syadehaka puman. I, the self, is changeless, and the body is ever changing. This is a fact of direct experience. Therefore, how can this body be the self?
So, when we have two things that are changing together, it's difficult to perceive the change. My favorite way of illustrating this is MacArthur BART station. So if you take the BART train at MacArthur, you've got 4 different trains. 2 of them are going in one direction, 2 of them are going in the other direction. But if you're in one of the trains and there's 2 side by side, if you look out the window, it's really cool because it looks like one is kind of going backwards and then forwards. You ever had that experience? Which one of you is moving? If you're both moving at the same rate, there's no experience of change or motion. Outer space, the space station is going thousands of miles an hour. But then the capsules come, or the old days, the shuttle would come, and it's coming very slowly up to the space station. Actually, they're both hurtling through space, thousands of miles an hour. But there's no perception of change. Do you know the changes in the body? Yes. So with reference to the body, the self is sthita, still, standing. It undergoes no change. Whatever's going on in life, if you stop, just I call it, put your thumb on your mind, just like slow it down. Engage in this intense introversion. Who am I? Notice the knower. Yep, I'm still the self. There's nothing there. Yet it shines as pure awareness. It shines, it is sentience. It's ever the knower of everything else in the world of change. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe Shankar is wrong. Maybe you'll wake up someday and you look inside and there's a little gray ball with wings. Hasn't happened to me yet. So far, the self is always the same. Nirupaham, without any form. Nirgunaihi, without any qualities of the mind. Eternally the same. So what? Nothing's going to harm you. Ever. You're safe. When you die, you will not be, oh, I'm dead inside the grave. No. No. Is that your feeling when you lost the child's body? I am not the body. Next verse.
Yasmat paramiti shrutya taya purusha lakshanam vinirnitam vimudhena katham ya dehaka puman. The men of wisdom have established the nature of Purusha by declaring that there is nothing higher than the Purusha. Then how can the body be the self?
Yes. So, what is that by which everything is known? Whatever knowledge takes place, there is a knower who's the ultimate knower, without which nothing can be known. There is no knowledge apart from awareness itself, beyond which there is nothing to know. So, for example, if you've read Sri Aurobindo, I only have a cursory understanding of his stuff, but I remember reading that he thought his realization was more special than other people. He had realized the self beyond the self. I'm not sure what he meant, Is it consciousness one aware of consciousness two behind? The scriptures say the self is one. And it's always here. It's simple. I realized a higher self. Okay, who did it? I did. That's yourself, not something you've experienced. We confuse in the mind. We keep looking for some experience. I was talking with someone who's questioned about LSD and mushrooms for spiritual experience. I think psychedelics have essentially only one possible use. They can prove to you that your concretized, ordinary way of seeing the world is not the only one. The lie of a psychedelic is now you think what you're seeing on the psychedelic is real. But before you had some trippy experience, who knew the ordinary mind? I did. When you watched everything merge and the toilet paper was breathing, who knew that? I did. When you came down, as every mind state passes, who knew that? I did. So what is that constant that's always there? Knower of everything, but beyond which there's nothing to know. Nothing can be known. Any thoughts on this? All right, next verse.
Sarva Purusha eveti sukte Purusha samkyate apyuchyate yata shrutya katham syate haka puman. In the Purusha Sukta, it is clearly stated that everything in this universe is Purusha alone. When Shruti is also asserting like that, how can the body be the self?
So here, as Shankara is wont to do frequently, he goes back to the Vedas themselves as the ultimate authority. And so here he says in the Purusha Suktam, the great hymn about the universal person, it clearly says Purusha is everything. So he says, don't believe him, but believe the Vedas. It's from the Rig Veda. Do you want some water, Mark? No. Okay. All right, next verse.
Asanga Purusha Prokto Brihadaranyake apicha Ananta Malasanslishta Katham Sate Haka Puman. Even the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad declares that the Purusha is totally unattached. How can this body, which is full of impurities, be the self?
So again, he footnotes it. Swamiji will frequently have the citation at the bottom. I don't know if he does here. But this, he's saying, is from the Brihad Aranyaka Upanishad. This is the Upanishad, by the way, that Shankara quotes the most frequently. It is not one that Swamiji has commented on because it's the largest of the Upanishads. But here he says, not only does Purusha Suktam say it, but Brihad Aranyakas says that the self, the Purusha, is the ground of being and is one. And here Shankara is striking at those yogis who hold on to the notion of individual Purushas. And I have a feeling why. Shankara was involved in polemics with other philosophical systems that were popular at the time. In many of the other scriptures, he will go through the various philosophies and say why they can't be the ultimate truth. And of course, if you were in one of these spiritual arguments, the one who won the argument through logic, the opponent had to convert to your particular viewpoint. We're going to find later on, this might be of interest to you, Scott, he's going to take on the Yoga Sutra, and he's going to not invalidate it, but he's certainly going to engage polemically with the Vyasa Bhashya, the great commentary. This is not the same Vyasa that Veda Vyasa. This is another Vyasa who wrote the first and the most authoritative commentary on the Yoga Sutra. But this Vyasa is a Sankhya philosopher. And in the Sankhya philosophy, he puts forward this idea of individual Purushas. That there are little lumps of consciousness running around called you and me. And Shankara here is saying, no, that's not what the Vedas actually really say. They say Purusha is one and is the ground of being of the whole universe. Have you come up against this, Scott, in your readings through the Yoga Sutra?
Yes, I like Vyasa's commentaries quite a bit, but I do recognize.
But this apparent conflict between the Vyasa conflict of the Vyasa philosophy and the Vedanta, the idea of individual Purushas.
Yes, I've come across it, and I just recognize it as his philosophy because.
Yes.
How can there be two?
Yes. You by Georgie's logic. But here Shankara is dealing with that. So this is why he's using the word Purusha and why he's driving home the point. There aren't a bunch of little individual Purushas. I'm fond of the term Jiva Bhavana. You find it in Gaudapada. Shankara will pick it up. Jiva Bhavana means the attitude or the feeling that I'm an individual. It certainly feels like that for the ordinary person whose mind's in ignorance. Certainly do feel like a person. But I certainly feel like the body and the ego in the dream state. Or one of my favorite things, you go to Las Vegas, you go to a stage hypnotist, and he hypnotizes your friend into thinking he's a chicken. The person runs around the stage, quack, 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 quack. Everybody's laughing. And he brings him out of the trance. Jiva Bhavan is like a trance. The dude says, oh man, I was sure I was a chicken. But was he really a chicken? So also, when the human mind is covered by avidya, covered by ignorance, I think I'm a person. I feel like a person. And that seems it's not. It's like a trance. It's like a dream. How do we get out of the dream? Vicharena, by means of vichara. Investigate yourself. Any thoughts on this? All right, going on.
Tatreva cha samakhyatah swayam chayotihir hi purushaha jada para prakashyoyam katham syadeha kapaman. Again, in the same Upanishad, it is said that the Purusha is by nature ever effulgent. How can this inert body, which is illumined by other, be the self?
So here Shankara uses a word that we find in Yoga Sutra and the Vyasa commentary, prakasha, the faculty of pure illumination, pure sensuence. So what we have in the discussion in the Yoga Sutra, he breaks it down to there's prakash, pure illumination, and then vimarsha, deliberation. So I have the direct perception of the stuff of the phenomenal world, and I think about it. And it's the vimarsha, it's the thinking. We call these vrittis. This is the stuff that while it's going on, it's very difficult to see the pure prakasha, the pure light, the pure awareness. Now, when I say light, I don't mean I'm in meditation. Oh, gold white light, that's the self. No, it's not a light that you see. It's metaphorical. Just as the lamp is the light by which all the objects in the room are illuminated, awareness is that by which everything is illuminated. It's very interesting. You go to the Hebrew scriptures. The first thing God says is fiat lux, let there be light. Awareness. So here Shankara is saying the Purusha is effulgent. It shines as chit, pure awareness. Any thoughts on this? Next verse.
Prokto api karma kandena hyatma deha vilakshanaha nityam pratyakshya tatphalam bhukto dehapata danantaram. Even in the Karma Kanda of the scriptures, it is stated that the eternal self is different from the body and it enjoys the fruits of action after the demise of body.
So here his reference is to the earlier parts of the Vedas. We normally divide the Vedas into 3 sections. Sometimes we say 4 sections. The first part, here he calls it the Karma Kanda, the action portion. We have the mantras. These are the various chants that priests do for various rituals. So if you go to a Hindu wedding, the priest goes on and on and on, invoking this deity, blessing this, blah, 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 blah. Those mantras come from the Vedas. The next section are called the Brahmanas. These are the rubrics for the priests. So if you're going to do this particular ritual, you need to build the fire this way, and you will need these elements to put into the fire, and you'll need one priest to do this, and you'll need another priest to do that. All those instructions, these are the rubrics that they tell the priests how to perform the various rituals. Then we have the Aranyakas, the forest literature. Sometimes that's separated from the Upanishads. Sometimes it's included in there. Upanishad means to sit down near, Upanishad. And they concern only one topic. What is the nature of ultimate reality? What is the ultimate nature and destiny of a human being? How are those the same? They're usually, almost always, now that I think of it, in the form of a dialogue between a teacher and the taught. So it's very clear in the Upanishads, in the Veda Anta, the concluding portion of the Vedas, that they thunder that the Purusha is consciousness, prakash, illuminating. But it's also true in the karma kanda, the earlier parts. The self is not the body. Going on.
Lingam chaneka sanyuktam chalam drishyam vikaricha avyapaka manastru rupam tatkatham syatyapumanayam. Even the subtle body is made up of many parts, unstable, a modification, and is an object of perception. It is limited and by nature unreal. How can it be the self?
So we've now dealt exhaustively with the idea that I am not the physical body. Maybe, though, I'm the transmigrating soul. Certainly in the Karma Kanda of the Vedas, we have the doctrine of reincarnation. We have it in the Gita. We talk about how there's a transmigrating soul. It goes by several names. Sukshma Sharira, subtle body. Anta Karana, the inner equipment. But it is that that moves from physical body to physical body. What are the elements of the subtle body? 5 organs of action: hands, feet, tongue, anus, and genitals. 5 organs of knowledge: eyes, ears, nose, tongue, and skin. The 5 pranas, the Panchavayu. Manas, mind. Buddhi, intellect. Ahankriti, the ego sense. And the vasanas. These comprise the inner equipment, the antakara. We experience the subtle body in the dream state. So when you're in the dream state, you see, hear, taste, touch, and smell. You can run about, you can drive the car. You have movement, therefore you have prana. You have emotions, you have thoughts. You have the sense that I am the dream body. I had the weirdest dream the other morning. Joseph Campbell was in my dream. Oh, very nice. But I saw him, I spoke with him. So we have all these elements in the subtle body. And what yoga says from this viewpoint, when the physical body approaches death, the pranas gather up into the subtle body, finally snip. Physical body dies, subtle body goes up to a more refined loka eventually. The grosser part of the mind falls away. Then you hang out in that loka until the environment for the next birth becomes available. The subtle body goes, you're born again. Why am I born? Because I desire to experience. I want to fulfill desire. And then I start on a new journey of what's going to make me happy. This is called the karma chakra, the wheel of karma. It's called samsara, worldly existence. But what Shankara is saying here is actually you are not the subtle body. Subtle body is comprised of parts. I think the 19 that I just said. But listen very carefully. The subtle body is inert. It moves just like the physical body moves. But it is not sentient. One feeling doesn't see another feeling. One thought doesn't know another thought. I know the sense perceptions. I know the feelings. I know the thoughts. I even see the thickening and thinning of ego. I even know the total darkness of pure vasana. The best way I know to illustrate it is imagine that I've got a mug of tea with a tea bag in it. The mug is like the physical body. The tea is like the subtle body. The tea bag in there is like my vasanas. Take the tea bag, doesn't look like a cup of tea to me. I put it in the water, it expresses itself. But you are like the space in the cup. So what is reincarnation? I've got one cup of tea and my cup starts to get pretty crappy. It's got cracks in it. So I pour the tea into another cup. But what happens to the space? Magic trick. See the cup here? There's cup space. There's room space. Pay attention to the cup space. Did I move space? No. What's the difference between cup space and room space? When I move the cup in space, does anything happen to the space? No. The cup is in space. There's not really space in the cup. And if I break the cup, what happens to the space? If I drink the tea, what happens to the space? So Shankara's point here, yes, we've described the subtle body. Yes, some of the scriptures do talk about reincarnation, that the transmigrating soul moves from physical body to physical body, the doctrine of reincarnation. But in truth, you are never born. You do not ever die. The conscious being that I am is birthless, changeless, and deathless. Any thoughts on this? All right, next verse.
Evam deha yadanyah atma purusha ishvaraha sarvatma sarvarupascha sarvatito aham vyaha. Thus I, the Purusha, am something entirely different from these two bodies. I am the self of everything, of all forms, beyond everything, and immutable, Lord of the universe.
So here he keeps going on this idea that the Purusha, the consciousness, is different from the physical body and the subtle body. Now, the meditation he's implying is this. I, Jim, am sitting here. You are sitting over there. I see the world from my viewpoint. I see Mark in that chair. I see Susali on the couch. You are seeing the world from your viewpoint, those of you in Zoom land. I am aware of my body. You are aware of your body. Difference. I'm aware of my energy, my prana. You are aware of your energy, your prana. I'm aware of my feelings. They are different than your feelings. You were aware of your feelings. I am aware of my thoughts. You are aware of your thoughts. But when I look behind my eyes and notice the noticer, there's just witnessing consciousness. Vast, empty. And when you look behind your eyes and notice the noticer, it's the same experience. The self in me is not like the self in you. Self in me is the self in you. Back to our example of the cups. So imagine I have one cup in this hand and another cup in this hand. The cups are different. The liquid in them are different. Did I move space? What's happening to space? Oh dear. Susuli came over, sat on my chair. She took myself. No. Mark gets up, moves to another chair. Does his self move? No. The self is not inside you, really. Your equipment is in the self. It seems like my self is a locus of perception that I peep out from. But I tell you that point, if you investigate, actually you find it has no dimension. The self in me is not like the self in you. The self in me is the self. Any thoughts on this? Next verse.
Syatma deha bhagena prapancha syeva satyata stokta tarkash yokta tarka shastrena tatha kim purusharthata. Thus, the enunciation of the difference between the Atman and the body has posited indeed, after the manner of the Tarka Shastra, the reality of the world. But what human purpose is served thereby?
So here he said that the Tarka means argument, Shastra. So the arguments put forward in the scriptures is the proper way to be discriminating between the self and the not self, between the witnessing consciousness and the physical body and the subtle body. Now the question is, so what? What purpose is to be accomplished by going through this process? What's the payoff? Put me in touch with the benefits of what I'm buying here. Let's go on and see what Shankara says.
Ityatma deha bhedena dehatmatvam nivaritam idanim dehabhedasya hyasattvam sputamuchyate. Thus, by the differentiation between the body and the self, the idea that the body is the self is negated. Now, the unreality of the body as a separate entity will be explained.
So the point of it is this: what causes my suffering? Yoga Vasishta thunders. Both bondage and liberation occur to the mind. The self is ever free. This is not going to change myself. It's going to change my mind. What is my bondage? Because of spiritual ignorance, I think I'm the body. Once that happens, and I think the world is separate from me, I feel incomplete. I'm in a condition of spiritual impoverishment. And I need more. I need different. I have to go from point A to point B, what we call kartavya, obligatory work, action. I'll be happy when, it'll be better if. Yoga says that's my suffering. What's causing it? Adhyasa, superimposition. I'm superimposing upon the self the qualities of the not self, meaning the body. How do I get out of it? The problem is ignorance. What's the antidote for ignorance? Knowledge. So we have lakshanam, indirect knowledge, through reading the scripture, through listening to the Guru. I have the opposite idea. No, Jim, you're not the body, you are the Purusha, you are the Atman. Okay. Believe that. But that's not my experience. What is liberation? The deeply rooted conviction in the mind, based in direct experience, that I am not the body, I'm the ground of being, I am the Purusha. What does this give me? It gives me existential freedom. I get at the very deepest part of my mind. It's all going to be okay. Nothing touches me. I finally find out where happiness is. Happiness is who I am. If I let go of this kartavya, this struggle, my mind comes home. Why? Because the self is Chidananda, it's bliss consciousness. My mind comes home to the self. I can taste that. That's the benefit. Now, he's going to go on and talk a little bit further about this. Going on.
Jim, I have a question.
Yes.
And it goes back to the previous verse. The relationship of the self to our notion of physical space is that physical space is within the self. The self,
That's correct,
encompasses physical space.
and you can prove that by direct experience. And the easiest way to do that is close your eyes and visualize a pea. Now let that go. Visualize an elephant. Now in your imagination, see if you can visualize standing on a very high mountain, looking at the vista, a valley below. Maybe there's a forest there. Maybe you have a river running through. Can you imagine that?
Yeah.
So you see, you created space in your mind. Now, when I dream something, there I was in this room talking with Joseph Campbell the other morning. I created the space of the room in my mind with my dream body and Joseph Campbell over there. And it took time for that to happen too. I created time and space. So you are the God of your dream. If you thoroughly understand the dream, then that's microcosm, macrocosm. The Lord is dreaming all this. It's no different. Consciousness is outside of time and space. And the physicists point to this. So at the Big Bang, there was a singularity. There was no time and there was no space. And in 3/4 of a second, the universe expanded to something like 9/10 of the size it is now. I can't remember the exact proportions. But space went just an instant. What was outside space? There is nothing outside space. Vedanta would say is space occurs in consciousness. Consciousness, if you really examine yourself, sometimes it feels like I'm just a point. Sometimes it seems like I'm this vast, empty sky, ocean of awareness. In fact, the self is outside of spatial dimension. Spatial dimension is in me. It's in a whole nother dimension. Very cool. Is that helpful?
Yes.
And the idea of pralaya, at the end of time, all this will space collapses. What will happen? Who knows? All right, any other questions? Let's stop here because I think we're going to get into a new area of discussion in the next section. Any other thoughts before we quit? Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Sri Guru Namaha. Hari Om. Thank you all.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Aditi.
Hope you feel better, sweetheart.
Thank you.
Thank you for suiting up and chanting even though you don't feel well.
No problem.
Bye.
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 Bye.